world is changing fast. New technologies are impacting how we think about products, services, and the way we live our lives. Nowhere is this trend more present than in financial services, where new business models and customer expectations are changing our conceptions about banking, finance, and the very nature of money. Welcome to Rebank, a visionary podcast about banking, fintech, and the future. The future of banking is here. Hello and welcome to Rebank. I'm your host, Will Beeson. Magnus Larsson is the founder and CEO of Majority, a digital bank for migrants in the U.S. As anyone who listens to this podcast knows, digital banks are making headlines all over the world. Some people are beginning to see the market as saturated, with seemingly dozens of offerings vying for consumer spending power. Early results suggest that digital challengers are struggling to convert customers at scale and bank them profitably. We're extremely early in the redesign of the stagnant, centuries-old retail banking industry, and we've yet to see much business model innovation. Majority is an early example of what I expect to be a wave of banking offerings, rethinking the role banks play in people's lives, and the relevant combinations of services to deliver value around money and the experiences it enables. Magnus is a serial entrepreneur with decades of experience in telecom. Prior to launching Majority, he was the CEO of Rebtel, a digital telecommunications company serving migrants in Europe. Magnus brings deep insight into the challenges faced by migrants, including but extending well beyond access to financial services. Majority's launch proposition includes banking, international calling, and remittances, all for a low monthly subscription. Banks have been subsidizing checking accounts with lending and fee-generating products for decades. Majority is doing the same thing with intrinsically linked ancillary services that reinforce community around its offering. For all of our past episodes and to subscribe to our newsletter, please visit bankingthefuture.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please welcome Magnus Larsson. Magnus Larsson, welcome to Rebank.
Thank you very much.
This is exciting. I'm glad we've been able to connect. You're the founder and CEO of Majority, which I think is a very interesting concept. It's a digital bank, and I'll let you describe it in your own words, but effectively a digital bank for migrants in the U.S. that pulls together telecom style products, remittance style products, and banking style products into a very specific offering to meet the needs of this segment. And you have extensive experience, I believe, as the CEO of some pretty compelling telco businesses in the past. Most recently, I think maybe even currently, Rebtel, which is on its own an interesting concept. Maybe I'll step back for a minute and let you introduce yourself and Majority in your own words.
Well, to start, Majority is the first, digital bank focusing solely on people that have moved to a new country, and we're starting off in the US market. And the background to that, which I think you were on, is also the some parts of the history of me and the team. I've been heading up a couple of different telco operators before, but previously to this, I also was part of building out a digital service, which is basically international calling and mobile top-up service called Rebtel. It's a tech company. We passed $100 million revenues a couple of years ago and a profitable business today, and focusing mainly on people living in the Western world that have come there and are calling back to different places of the world, so to say. And doing that and learning a lot about, being living in another country. Myself, I was a migrant in the US. I've been there twice, living, first working, then also studying at one point. And I experienced, so to say, the hurdles and the problems, moving to another country. And there's a couple of things. And why calling is the first thing, because the first thing you need to do when you come to new countries is that you need to call mom and tell you're alive, so to say. But after that, you're experiencing other problems. It's getting a job, it's getting the visa, it's getting a bank account, which is highly complicated in many countries, and also sending money back home. And that's why today what the thing that we launched, the bank that we launched in the US market, is where we combined the most relevant services, which is it's a bank account with a Visa connected with it, but it also includes calling either free, unlimited, or at the lowest cost in the market, and an unlimited free remittance service. And we bundle that in together, what we call a membership, more of a, you could say, a Netflix model, where you pay $5 a month, and you get basically, you should have think about it that you get everything you need for a fixed price.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this because basically what it feels like you're doing is pulling together the most compelling components of international remittances, international calling for this specific segment, and banking into a subscription bundle, which I guess, based on my own work in digital banking, allows you to, I guess, in some ways, support the economic support profitability through some of the revenue streams that these individual components are throwing off, interchange, interest on savings balances, things like that, but also via the subscription model ensure that you're kind of at all times covering your basic infrastructure costs and delivering a viable business. And I guess the reason that it has strong potential to work in your specific segment is that the bundle that you're delivering is of extreme relevance and extreme value to one segment. Maybe that's actually an interesting place to dig in a little bit. So if we look around the world at kind of the digital banks who are making headlines, raising money at the highest valuations, they're largely segment agnostic, if you will, in terms of who their target customer is. The Monzos, the N26s, the Revoluts, and I guess in many ways they're looking to be the next iteration of a bank for mobile native customers. Some of those companies have delivered some interesting unit economics. Others are still working to do so. Can you just talk through the thought process around targeting a specific segment and the benefits you see in that versus offering a more kind of mass
I
market
think your
opportunity?
reasoning around the market is really, really interesting. And I think when I look at the market today, I think actually even the ones that I think mainly maybe investors think will become the new Deutsche Bank of the world, or the new Bank of America of the world, so to say, the N26, Monzo, Revolut, etc., is that if you look on their customer base as well, I think they are already quite segmented in the aspect that I think they are focusing highly on millennials, because that's at least how it looks from the outside. But coming back to what we are looking into, and our thought process, so to say, on how we came, well, we started off from our target group, so to say, are the different communities that we've been working with over the years, and we get to know and learn a lot about them for quite some time. And when you're looking at the different problems that you're having when you're living in another, in terms of calling, sending money, and banking, and you're looking especially, I think, on the US market, is that you're seeing that in general, the average cost for a migrant is around $10 each for these services, if you think about the traditional side of it. And of course, in each of these segments, you have, you could say, in some aspects, innovators. And to simplify it, I think you could take, if you take money remittance, which I think is a very clear service, you have also there, you have a lot of successful tech companies right now, like TransferWise, Remitly, and WorldRemit, etc. And they are competing with the traditional banks, but also they're competing with the Western Union and the MoneyGrams, etc. And if you, to simplify it even easier, you could say those were built on a costly offline structure, and that's why, on average, a customer pays maybe $10 per transaction using one of those. What the new tech companies have done there in the remittance service is that they are spending $5 each. The customer spends $5 each on transaction, because they don't have the cost of all the brick and mortar, basically. What we're doing is that we're bundling now the service, and from the unit economics, so to say, of that, the beauty of that is that basically we can give away the services for free or at cost, and we are building it up around our subscription model. So I think that is one of also the differences. It's quite interesting as well. I think, 5, 10 years ago, when you said that you're going to build a multi-purpose product, no one would have believed that that would be a great idea. But we're having, tremendous positive, response from our customers, because we're solving the real relevant problems and we're putting them together. So actually, it becomes the single purpose, so to say, in this aspect, is that it's solving the problems that you're having as a customer. Instead of going to three different places or using three different apps, you can just get it in one place.
So I think we referred before to your extensive uh, telco experience. To what extent is Majority an extension of either an existing telco business or kind of leveraging an existing product offering or existing infrastructure, and thinking about creating a new tailored offering and or driving new economics by offering banking, and to what extent is it a brand new few people sitting around thinking we need to fix banking for this segment? What would be the best way to go about doing that?
I think when we started the journey with our previous business, Rebtel, so to say, 5 years ago, it was actually part of that journey was also a high interest, because the group that we were then and we are today in also in Majority, well, we all been living in different countries all over the world, and I think we first had an experience that, and I think it's also become, of course, I'm from Sweden, with that aspect, I'm privileged in many ways because I speak English fairly well. And when I moved to the US, which is a very similar country in some aspects, it was still really hard for me. And then you can take all the differences of just moving to another country and how difficult it is to get these services. But what we learned over the years, running this telco business for this community, is the real needs of the community. Because what we changed, and one of the key things to our model, is also that we have built a model where we acquire customers not digitally online, or also not but giving away things for free, is that we have built out what we call our community model, where we basically are working with the different communities, where we hire people within the community as brand ambassadors and as a salespeople within the communities, also carrying our brand and building that out, and building on the high referral rates that exist within our communities. And that's also how we acquiring customers, and also building our position. And we felt that knowing the customers very well was the foundation. Then, coming back to your point as well, I think, but the experience from working and knowing that you need to call and you need to do these other things was also partially. And I think also part of the way that we decided to bundle our products together into one subscription also comes from that experience. Because if you think about it from a consumer perspective, which I think is actually, maybe the most important, is that when you send money to someone back home, what do you do usually after you send the money? Well, you call and see if they got the money. So there's that perfect kind of correlation, and that's so easy when I say it to kind of understand. But it's like it's kind of getting the business and understanding that. It actually took some time. It's like, oh, of course, that's how it works. You send money and then I call, and that's how we also came to building out Majority, because we wanted to build a bigger company, so to say.
You're probably familiar with Monies in the UK. They've been operating for a number of years now, looking specifically to help solve the problem. I think it was born from the experience of EU migrants. I think they're offering supports migrants from other countries as well, but helping people get set up, open accounts when they arrive, because it's as you mentioned before, painful. I've had my own experiences in continental Europe, here in the UK as a new arrival, opening an account. It's certainly a valuable service. I think they've created a tremendous amount of value and goodwill among their customers. Whether it's because they've been focused on a specific segment or not, they've nonetheless maybe not scaled as quickly as some of the more quote unquote mainstream digital bank offerings, and I think, like many of their digital bank peers, they have yet to really crack the code of profitability. What lessons do you take from their experience, and how do you think you're approaching things differently?
Well, first of all, I mean, they are focusing on the European market, and we're sort of say in the US market. And I think the characteristics of those two different markets are quite different. I think also the segments that we are doing, the communities that we're working on separates a little bit. But I think I wouldn't sort of say count out Moniz from becoming a winner in the market, because I think what we're seeing in general in the market is one big question that everyone is having, I think, right now on digital banks is like, is any one of them ever going to make any money? And I think most of people are also thinking, okay, they will make money the day when they move into credit or lending, etc., because that's usually where, so to say, the margins in the banking side. I think looking at the European market, and maybe since the European market has actually been a little bit more, being ahead, so to say, of the US market when it comes to digital banking, I would say that it will be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised to see that Moniz comes out as actually one of the really interesting players in Europe, because I think they have a clear segment, and usually when you have a clear segment, it's easier to find the consumer willingness to also pay. Yeah, I think the future will tell of that. I think, but then coming back, maybe what is the difference when we are looking and coming back? I think to what I said previous as well. It's like in the U.S. market, and if we look at some of our key communities that we work with, which are, as an example, I mean, we're starting off our journey, so to say, with the Nigerians in Houston, and there you can see a very coming back again, these users are spending $10 on calling, $10 on banking, and they're spending $10 on sending money per month. So there's a very clear willingness to pay for these services, and it is interesting, I think, and I think that's the aspect of all, so to say, digital banks today, is that when we're looking at our segment, it's like, why do people don't go to the ordinary banks and open a bank account? And I think there is a very human kind of thing. And one of the other things that we're doing then with our model is that we're offering an advisor that is from your home country when you're opening an account, so you can actually cross that cultural difference. Because I can go back to myself when I moved to the US, walking into a bank, to Bank of America, and trying to open a bank account. It was actually the not knowing the difference between a current account and a savings account, and the different versions of banking, because it wasn't exactly as it always was in Sweden. That's one of the major reasons why actually people don't get a bank account on the normal. It's not because a lot of the prejudice is also that it's because people are illegal, etc. And usually it's not that. It's very human that you don't want to do that, and that's why also most of these services today are consumed offline in kiosks, etc.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me, hearing you speak, like it's pretty obvious to you that banking is just one component of a broader offering to solve the problems for this segment. Are you surprised, coming from outside of banking, that the vast majority of digital banks currently operating aren't more actively looking to incorporate non-banking, non-financial services components into their offerings?
I think maybe what is surprising me, so to say, is this pure, I mean, digitalization and the digital side, so to say, of building banks, and what from. And usually I don't like those words, because I mean the only thing that is changing is that the consumer behavior is changing. But I really believe that the future of banking will be segmented. And with that, so to say, if you believe in that, then I would think it would be very weird for people to not think, okay, what does my customer base want? And then maybe looking a little bit broader in that aspect. But I think also it's so easy to define yourself by a word and or an industry. And I think maybe that's because I partially have done an industry shift, so to say, in my career. And I think my common thread has been that the communities and people that have moved to another border, the problems, I've been looking after those, and I've been thinking about those problems. It even started, one of my telco experience was running one of the operators here in Sweden that was absolute dominant, so to say, within the immigrant segment in Sweden, and that's also maybe where some of my background also looking at this. And because the different diasporas of the world are also global, they're, they're, and the sizing of them are so big if you just look at them. But we are, I think, we're defined so many times by industry, which industry are we in. We're also defined by borders. We're defined by, because that's how the construct, so to say, of the world, right? But I think that's where there is a lot of opportunity to view and look, I think, beyond that, and see, because I believe you will find a lot of business opportunities as well there.
That's a very strong strong point you're making. I like that a lot. If we look around the market a little bit, O2 banking in Europe, Orange Bank in France, T-Mobile Money in the US, there seems to be something around this combination of telco and banking. In in your experience and in your view, what is it about these two services that make them so synergistic, I guess?
There is actually, I think I would answer that question in two, because when it comes to us, I think it comes very clearly from a consumer, is because you send money, you also have a need to see, did my money arrive or not? And so there's a clear clarity. And sometimes when you talk about calling and the calling service that we're applying, people don't think about that. There's 1 to 2 billion people that doesn't have perfect internet. That's why also this sort of, normal calling exists. Otherwise, what everyone would be using VoIP. So there, from our perspective, it's become from a user perspective. When it comes to the industry side, so to say, that you're seeing, Orange and T-Mobile, etc., moving into money, I think, I'm not sure that this is actually how it should be done. I think some parts why this happened is probably inspired from actually other countries in the world, more like Kenya, where you have M-Pesa, which has become like one very dominant financial services. And also, I think me coming and spend years in the telco industry, I think this is also their way of actually looking for survival in a world where they know they're just going to become a bit pipe sooner or later. So I think I think this is rather a
Hmm.
having an industry where there's concentrated a lot of profitability and a lot of money, and they're trying to think outside of where should they branch in, because you're seeing at the same time, I think, in the telco space, at some places they're branching into financial services, at other points they're branching into media. And I think this is just this is more of an outcome of trying to figure out what we're going to do when after a while, when we have an eSIM in every phone, and you will just be a click and you pick the best net, because the price is the same with an operator anymore. They're just trying to find a way in the value chain uh, to do that. I wouldn't bet my money, so to say, that any telco player would actually rule the financial services world in the future.
Yeah. Do you think they're viewing this more as a marketing play, i.e., I don't know, customers with their cards who are using it to transact or just flashing their branding more often in an industry that's traditionally kind of like a once a month or once every few years that contract renewal touch point? Or is there something, I don't know, is there something fundamental about the way that a company who has high marginal profitability products, i.e., airtime and mobile data, can almost use that as a very cheap currency to look to incentivize, user behavior and adoption of services in ways that are likely to drive meaningful revenues through kind of traditional, banking and finance fee structures.
No, I think you were onto something. I think that's, 10 years ago in that industry, I mean, it was every telco operator of the world had departments with employing thousands of people where they have what was called at that point value added services departments. So they were looking into to all of them. And I think today, since this has been a market where there's no growth, when you talk about, except that people are using more and more data, if you talk about the telco space, I think they are viewing this as more as a anti-churn, higher engagement, because the telco that that controls are the best of keeping the customer. That's probably the one of the best ways to grow your business, so to say, is actually not losing customers. So I think you're right. I think many of these are also looking at this as what more can we add, coming back as well. That's why I also see they're bundling with TV services or they're bundling with other services. So I think their play in the financial space is and also I think it's similar. I think you can move that the same discussion, or I think when you're looking at telcos doing that, is a move that we are already seeing, and we will see it even more. Is the ones with a huge customer base like Facebook, Google, and Apple. I mean, Apple now launched their card. Google opened their current account in the US. You see in Facebook wanting to do Libra, and they just want to leverage their old, their huge customer bases globally. And you can look at these US mega companies. And I mean, in one way, they're already a little bit late, because if you look on the Chinese and the Asian companies, they have already taken many, many bigger steps to moving in with Alipay and WeChat, etc., bundling, so to say, and moving into the financial space. So I think they're also reacting to that, and I think everyone with huge customer bases, since the banking space is changing, will also try to move, so to say, in this space and see if there's piece of the piece of the cake, right, out
Well,
there.
one of the similarities between the telcos offering banking services and the big tech players that you just mentioned is simply the scale of consumer users that they have, and presumably the relative ease, of cross-selling banking products. Let me use a better term, of effectively starting to offer other services,
Yeah.
specifically banking services, to those already engaged users, effectively bringing down the cost of new customer acquisition. And I think that, if I first, if you look around the digital banking space,
Yeah.
fintech, consumer fintech in general, like you're often looking at extremely high cost of acquisition, which is in many cases why these companies have raised so much money, why valuations are appearing increasingly inflated. And if I also think about a comment that Michael Kent, founder of Asimo, a remittance business, made to me at one point, their cost of acquisition began to fall significantly the more early adoption they got from the types of customers that they were looking to provide services for. So, in many cases, I think they are mostly focused on maybe kind of UK to Eastern Europe, or developed countries to Eastern Europe corridors. But if you get in with a specific community who's using it to create or to preserve meaningful value for themselves, they're very likely to be telling their friends about it. There's something naturally kind of community building about remittances and the types of people who are using it, the communities, expat communities, migrant dynamics, things like that. Do you view that as a likely driver and potentially competitive advantage for you guys?
Most definitely. Our whole model is based, so to say, around the fact, and that when you move to another country, you are in search of relationships. And I think that is also the reason why why referral is much higher. I always thought about I could take a personal example. When I moved to the US to study, for some reason I start asking other Swedes in that city how I should do stuff, people that I probably would never trusted in Sweden. But suddenly, just because they were from Sweden, they became like a point of reference for me when I asked, okay, which bank account should I have? Where should I? Which area should I live in? Where should I? Where which bank should all of those questions. And then usually, and so you start with a small circle of friends, and then you start with others, internationals, and then the third layer, so to say, when you got into that, you will come to, so to say, the people that are living there. So that is like, it's a natural part of it, integration, so to say, to the place where you're moving, and we see in that very highly. Coming back then to our, and we're seeing that, and our model is based basically, you could say, on these corridors, meaning if you are a Nigerian living in Houston and you're calling to calling and sending money to Nigeria, usually working with that community, and then you're spreading that out to the to Nigerians living all over the US. It's the same thing if you're looking at Washington and the Ethiopians. You see that they have focal points, because if you look on the data, I think here's an interesting part, coming back to your referral, is that there's roughly 300 million people that have migrated in the world. Less than 10% that are refugees. That's something I always have to say, because people always, when they think immigrants or migrants, they think about refugees. Less than 10% are refugees. The rest are people that travel to get a better life, for love, for various, to fulfill their ambitions, so to say. But we look at that, and the majority is living in 6, 7 countries, and but they're not really living in these countries. Instead, they're living in cities, and every different diaspora usually have a focal point in some city. So our model is basically city by city, community by community, and how we build out that over the US. And I think then, on a general note, I think, talking about remittance services, I think there is one fact in the world where I find interesting, that no one else is talking maybe more loudly about. If you look at the data that exists, $689 million were sent in remittances the last year. And that is a huge number. That's more than all the foreign direct investment in the world. And that is probably the biggest distributor of wealth in the world as well. Because if you look at a lot of the receiving countries, this is peer to peer, meaning me as a private person sending to my mom, or something similar. Um, GDP, it can be up to 20-30% in various countries of the world, is actually based from these remittances. So I think a lot of this remittance side of the business is, but on average, it's 7% margin paid, which is completely insane if you think about the volume of transaction that is connected to a 7% margin, right?
Right. Okay, so to your point around cities and specific diasporas, it sounds like you're starting in Houston, focusing on the Nigerian community. What stage are you guys at right now? It looks like maybe the product is available to early customers, as you kind of continue to shape it and to start to grow.
Yeah. So we have rolled out this on an invitation only to start off with, because we wanted to build out the quality of the service, of course. And we opened it up for the first testers in April last year. In October, we opened up our sales channel mainly in Houston. And now, in a couple of weeks, we're actually now opening it up and taking away the invite only. So we're opening it up for the whole US market. I mean, we have the most interesting period of time, and we have already, 20,000 customers that actually have now, during the last 2.5 months, came in and joined the community. And we're coming out with the numbers, I think, just in short here. In a couple of weeks, we're launching, so to say.
Excellent. I want to ask you one more question out of personal interest before we wrap up. So, having come from outside of banking and now been very deeply immersed in this for the past, it sounds like at least year or two, what is there anything about banking or working with the types of partners that you're working with to set up your model that you have found surprising, either in a positive or negative way?
Oh, that is a really good question. I th- I think I might answer that question. I think all big industries have a lot of similarities. The bigger the companies, the slower they are, so to say, right? uh, what I find within the fintech space right now is this. It feels the entrepreneurial spirit is big, and I think just the fact that it's changing so rapidly and so much, I think even the bigger players are understanding it now. And I'm maybe lucky because maybe we are coming. I mean, some of the digital banks started in 2013, and I mean we started 2 years ago, so to say, with this journey. And we maybe have the luck also to come after they've been knocking on all the doors, so to say. But I think one of the differences, of course, which is a huge difference coming from outside, is the regulatory side of the space, which I and we identified it's also one of the key, which is also going to be one of our core assets, but also one of our key challenges is how to develop and becoming prominent when it comes to our CIP process or how we look at this. I think we have a lot of learnings from working with our segment from many years, but it's also we're also being faced with I think a lot of prejudice um, and a lot of challenges because people don't know basically. Because as an example, I mean we are focusing as on the Nigerians, as you know. Most people don't know that they came to the US because of the oil industry, meaning there's the population in the US is fairly well educated, and on the income level they're actually on the mid size of the US market, and very successful. And we picked them because they are also much more established, so to say, in the US. So from a compliance perspective, everyone have a social security number, etc. But here, I think working in a compliance space, here's a lot of education and a lot of work that we have around that we are facing, so to say, on an everyday basis, and that is a difference. But it's also, I think, also the great opportunity as well.
Fantastic. Look, I think you guys are doing something extremely interesting. I look forward to watching your guys' progress very closely.
Thank you.
Magnus Larsson, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Will.
Thanks for tuning in to Rebank. If you liked today's show, reach out. Follow us on Twitter at Rebank Podcast and join the conversation. For more on banking, fintech, and the future, check out our regular content at www.bankingthefuture.com.